The morning federal agents raided our HOA president's mansion, I realized the woman we trusted with millions of dollars had been running the biggest fraud scheme our community had ever seen. My name is Barbara Martinez, and I've lived in Pinewood Estates for 15 years. It's one of those upscale gated communities where million-dollar homes line perfectly manicured streets, where everyone drives luxury cars, and where the HOA rules are enforced with an iron fist. Our HOA president, Karen Blackwell, had been in charge for 8 years, and most residents worshipped her. She threw amazing community events, kept the neighborhood looking immaculate, and always had a warm smile for everyone. I never suspected she was a criminal mastermind stealing millions from us until that freezing morning in January 20. It all started 3 months earlier, in October 2024, when I attended a quarterly HOA meeting. I'll be honest, usually skipped these meetings. They were boring, predictable, and Karen always dominated the conversation anyway. But my husband Marcus had been complaining about our HOA dues increasing for the 3rd year in a row, so I decided to actually pay attention to where our money was going. The meeting was held in our clubhouse, a beautiful building with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that Karen constantly bragged about. About 40 residents showed up, which was actually a good turnout for Pinewood Estates. Karen stood at the front of the room, wearing an expensive designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation showing various community expenses. As you can see, our landscaping costs have increased to accommodate the expanded services we're now providing, Karen said smoothly, pointing to a slide that showed landscaping expenses of $95,000 per quarter. Barbara raised her hand slowly, a question forming on her face. I raised my hand. Excuse me, Karen. Last year, our quarterly landscaping costs were $32,000. Why did they triple? Karen's smile tightened, but she maintained her composure. Barbara, we've upgraded to a premium service provider that offers superior quality. I'm sure you've noticed how beautiful our entrance looks. Actually, I hadn't noticed any difference. The entrance looked exactly the same as it had for years. But before I could respond, Karen had already moved on to the next slide. Pool maintenance has also increased due to new safety regulations, she continued. We're now paying $68,000 quarterly to ensure our 3 community pools meet all state requirements. Something felt off. $68,000 per quarter meant $272,000 per year for 3 small pools. That seemed insane. After the meeting, I approached Karen directly. I'd like to see the contracts with these new vendors. As a homeowner, I have the right to review HOA financial documents. Karen's friendly demeanor vanished instantly. Her eyes turned cold. Barbara, I don't appreciate you questioning my management in front of the entire community. Everything I do is approved by the board and completely legitimate. If you continue to harass me with these accusations, I'll have no choice but to cite you for creating a hostile environment. Barbara's expression hardened with determination. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm simply requesting to see public documents that I'm legally entitled to review. Fine, Karen snapped. Submit a formal written request through the proper channels, and you'll receive the documents within 30 days, as required by law. She turned and walked away before I could respond. That night, I told Marcus what had happened. He's a software engineer and has always been skeptical of authority figures, so he immediately sided with me. $95,000 per quarter for landscaping. That's $380,000 per year. Barbara, that's insane. Even if they were planting gold-plated roses, that's way too much. I know. And did you notice Karen's reaction when I asked about it? She got defensive immediately. Marcus pulled out his laptop. What's the name of the landscaping company? I checked my phone where I'd taken photos of Karen's presentation. Elite Grounds Management. Marcus typed it into Google. We waited. Nothing came up. No website, no reviews, no social media, no business listings. It was like Elite Grounds Management didn't exist. Try the pool company, I said. What's it called? Premium Aquatic Services. Same result. Nothing. Zero online presence. Barbara leaned forward, her suspicion growing. "This is weird," Marcus muttered. "Every legitimate business has some kind of online presence nowadays. Even if they don't have a fancy website, they'd at least have Google reviews or a Facebook page." Over the next week, I submitted formal written requests for copies of all vendor contracts, financial statements for the past 5 years, and board meeting minutes where these contracts were approved. I also requested copies of canceled checks showing payments to vendors. Karen fought me every step of the way. She claimed the contracts contained proprietary information and couldn't be shared. She said the board meeting minutes were in executive session and were confidential. She told me the canceled checks were maintained by the HOA's management company and would take several weeks to retrieve. I knew my rights. I'd done my research. Financial documents are not confidential in our state unless they involve individual homeowner information or pending litigation. Vendor contracts are public record. Karen was stalling, which made me even more suspicious. I decided to recruit help. I reached out to other homeowners who I thought might be willing to ask questions. The first person I contacted was James Choon, a retired FBI agent who lived 2 streets over. James was in his 60s, sharp as a tack, and it always struck me as someone who didn't tolerate nonsense. "Barbara, I'm glad you called," James said when I explained the situation. "I've had concerns about Karen for over a year, but I didn't have any concrete evidence, just a gut feeling that something wasn't right." "What kind of concerns?" "Little things, the way she controls every aspect of the HOA. How she handpicked all the current board members after the previous board mysteriously resigned 3 years ago. The fact that she refuses any kind of financial oversight. And honestly, her lifestyle doesn't match what an HOA president should be able to afford." "What do you mean?" James pulled up Karen's social media on his phone. Her Instagram was public, and it was full of photos of exotic vacations, designer handbags, luxury jewelry, and expensive restaurant meals. HOA presidents don't get paid. It's a volunteer position. Karen's husband is a middle school teacher. Combined, they should be making maybe $90,000 per year. But look at this lifestyle. These vacations alone probably cost $50,000 per year. That Hermes bag she's holding in this photo, $25,000. Those earrings, at least $15,000. Barbara's eyes widened in shock. Maybe she has family money? Maybe. Or maybe she's funding her lifestyle with HOA money. "Barbara, in my 30 years with the FBI, I investigated dozens of embezzlement cases. This has all the hallmarks of frothy vendors, lack of financial transparency, defensive behavior when questioned, and a lifestyle that doesn't match legitimate income. What should I do? Keep requesting documents. If she continues to stonewall you, file a complaint with the state HOA regulatory board. And start documenting everything, every interaction, every denial, every suspicious expense. If this is fraud, we'll need evidence to prove it." I followed James's advice. I submitted another formal request, this time citing specific state laws that required disclosure. I also filed a complaint with the state regulatory board, alleging that Karen was violating transparency requirements. Karen retaliated immediately. 3 days after I filed the complaint, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. I was being fined $4,500 for various violations. My mailbox was the wrong color. It wasn't. My lawn exceeded the maximum approved grass height by 1/4 inch. It didn't. My holiday decorations were displayed outside the approved time frame. They weren't. And I had repeatedly harassed the HOA president with frivolous document requests. Barbara clenched her fists in anger. I was furious. This was clearly retaliation, and it was clearly meant to intimidate me into silence. But it had the opposite effect. Now I was absolutely certain Karen was hiding something major. I hired my own attorney, a woman named Diana Foster, who specialized in HOA disputes. Diana took one look at the violations and laughed. "This is textbook retaliation. We're going to fight every single one of these charges. And we're going to file a countersuit for harassment. But more importantly, we're going to force Karen to produce those financial documents. Under state law, she has to comply within 30 days or face penalties." Diana filed a motion in court demanding the HOA produce all requested documents. The judge agreed and ordered Karen to comply within 10 days or face contempt charges and daily fines. Karen's attorney tried to fight it, but the judge wasn't having it. These are public documents that any homeowner is entitled to review. Produce them immediately, or your client will be held in contempt. 2 days later, I received a massive box of documents: financial statements, vendor contracts, canceled checks, board meeting minutes, everything I'd requested. It was clear Karen had only produced them because she was legally forced to. I spread everything out on my dining room table and started analyzing it with Marcus and James. What we found was absolutely shocking. Every single vendor that Karen had hired over the past 5 years was fake. Elite Grounds Management, Premium Aquatic Services, Apex Security Solutions, Professional Paving Group, none of them existed as legitimate businesses. They weren't registered with the state. They had no business licenses. They had no online presence. But the checks were real. The HOA had written checks totaling millions of dollars to these fake companies over 5 years. "Look at this," James said, examining the back of a canceled check made out to Elite Grounds Management for $95,000. This was deposited into an account at First National Bank. "See that account number? I have a friend who still works at the bureau. Let me make a call." Barbara nodded grimly, understanding the implications. James stepped into another room to make his call. He came back 20 minutes later, his face grave. "The account belongs to a shell corporation called KMB Holdings, LLC. Want to guess who the registered agent is?" "Karen Mitchell Blackwell," I whispered. "Bingo. KMB Karen Mitchell Blackwell. She wasn't even creative about it." "Barbara, this is fraud. Major fraud. We're not talking about thousands of dollars. Based on what I'm seeing in these documents, Karen has stolen at least $2 million, probably closer to $3 million. Day room spun. $3 million. Karen had stolen $3 million from our community over 5 years. Money that should have gone to maintaining our homes, our security, our amenities. Instead, it had paid for her designer bags, her exotic vacations, and her luxury lifestyle. "We need to report this to the police immediately," Marcus said. "Not the police," James corrected. "This crosses the federal threshold for mail and wire fraud. We need to report it to the FBI." That night, James contacted his former colleagues at the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. He sent them all our evidence, the financial documents, the analysis showing the fake vendors, the proof that checks were being deposited into Karen's shell company. The FBI took it seriously. Within 48 hours, Special Agent Maria Rodriguez called me directly. "Mrs. Martinez, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Based on the evidence you've provided, we're opening a formal investigation into Karen Blackwell for wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering. I need you to understand that this investigation is now confidential. You cannot discuss it with anyone except your immediate family and your attorney. How long will the investigation take? It depends on what else we find. From what you've shown us, we have enough for search warrants. We'll be executing those soon. Be prepared when we move. It's going to be very public, and the community is going to have a lot of questions." "I understand. One more thing, Mrs. Martinez. Be careful. People who commit fraud at this level are often desperate when they're caught. If Karen suspects you're the one who reported her, she might retaliate in dangerous ways. We'll have agents monitoring the situation, but please be vigilant." 2 weeks passed with no visible activity. Life in Pinewood Estates continued normally. Karen threw a lavish Halloween party at the clubhouse. She posted photos on Instagram of her latest shopping trip to Paris. She smiled and waved at neighbors, like she didn't have a care in the world. Then came the morning of November 15th, 2024. I was in my kitchen making coffee when Marcus called out from the living room. "Barbara, you need to see this." I walked into the living room, where he was standing at our front window. Down the street, at Karen's massive $2.5 million house, 6 black SUVs were parked in the circular driveway. People in FBI windbreakers, were everywhere, some carrying boxers out of the house, others taking photos, a few standing guard. Karen was on her front lawn in her silk bathrobe, her hair a mess, air-face pale, talking to two agents in suits. I could see her gesturing angrily, but the agents weren't reacting. They were professional and calm. Barbara stood at the window, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. "Oh my God," I whispered. They actually did it. As I watched, an agent led Karen to one of the SUVs. Her hands weren't cuffed, but it was clear she wasn't leaving voluntarily. She looked around the neighborhood, scanning the houses. Then her eyes landed on mine. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the pure hatred on her face. She knew. Somehow, she knew I was the one who had exposed her. Karen mouthed 2 words at me before getting into the SUV. "You're dead." A chill ran down my spine. As federal agents seized millions in assets from Karen's mansion, I realized that exposing her fraud scheme was just the beginning. Her whispered threat hung in the air like poison, and I suddenly understood that catching a criminal and staying safe from their revenge were 2 very different things. The biggest question wasn't whether Karen would face justice, it was whether I would survive to see it. Have you ever exposed someone's fraud scheme? What happened next? Drop a comment below, and make sure you're subscribed, because part 2 reveals what the FBI found inside Karen's house. And trust me, the fraud was even bigger than anyone imagined. Hit that like button if you want to see justice served. Karen's whispered threat, "You're dead," echoed in my mind for hours after the FBI took her away. I tried to convince myself it was just the angry outburst of a caught criminal, nothing more. But the look in her eyes had been pure venom, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Barbara paced nervously by the window, checking the street every few minutes. My husband Marcus found me standing at the window 2 hours after the FBI raid, still watching Karen's house as agents continued loading boxers into their vehicles. "Barb, you need to come away from the window. You're making yourself crazy," she threatened me. "Marcus." Right there in front of federal agents, she mouthed, "You're dead at me." Marcus put his hands on my shoulders. "She's in FBI custody. She can't hurt you. And even if she could, we have security cameras. We have a gated community. We have an HOA president who stole $3 million and got away with it for 5 years. I interrupted. "Someone that smart and that ruthless doesn't go down quietly." My phone rang. It was Special Agent Maria Rodriguez. "Mrs. Martinez, I wanted to give you an update. Karen Blackwell is currently being questioned at our field office. We executed search warrants on her home, her office, and 3 storage units she was renting under false names. What we found is... extensive." "Extensive how?" "We found financial records going back 8 years, not 5. Multiple bank accounts in different names. Evidence of additional shell companies, beyond the ones you identified. Luxury items totaling over $1 million in value: designer clothes, jewelry, artwork, collectibles. We also found documents suggesting she may have been running similar schemes in other communities before moving to Pinewood Estates." Barbara's hand went to her mouth in shock. I felt dizzy. "Other communities." "Other communities? You mean this isn't the first time she's done this?" "We're still investigating. But it appears Karen Blackwell has been operating fraudulent schemes for at least 12 years. We found evidence linking her to HOA fraud in 2 other states, Arizona and Florida. She would move into an upscale community, volunteer for the HOA board, work her way up to president, and then systematically steal from the community for 3 to 5 years before moving to a new location." Oh my God. How much money are we talking about? Across all 3 communities, we estimate she's stolen between $8 and $10 million total. Pinewood Estates was her biggest score, approximately $3.2 million over 8 years. $3.2 million. The number was staggering. "What happens now?" I asked. "We're building a case for federal prosecution: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, identity theft. She's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison if convicted. But Mrs. Martinez, I need to warn you about something. Karen is claiming she's innocent. She's saying someone else set up those shell companies and that she was framed. That's ridiculous. Her initials are literally in the company name KMB Holdings. I agree. It's a weak defense. But here's what concerns me. She specifically named you as the person who framed her. She's telling anyone who will listen that you had access to HOA finances as a board member. I was never on the board. I know that. But some of your neighbors might not. Karen is smart and manipulative. She's going to try to turn the community against you before this goes to trial. And that could put you in danger from people who believe her lies. Barbara clenched her fists, anger rising in her chest. Agent Rodriguez continued, "We're going to request that Karen be held without bail due to flight risk. She has multiple passports under different names that we found in one of her storage units. But I need you to be cautious. Don't engage with neighbors who confront you. Don't discuss the case publicly. And if you feel threatened in any way, call 911 immediately and then call me." After I hung up, Marcus and I sat in silence. $8 to $10 million, Marcus finally said. She's been doing this for 12 years. How did we not see it? Because she was an expert. She built trust, eliminated anyone who questioned her. The next few days were chaos. News of the FBI raid spread everywhere. Reporters camped outside the neighborhood gates. Our peaceful community had become a circus, and just as Agent Rodriguez predicted, Karen's defense strategy worked on some residents. 3 days after the arrest, I went to the clubhouse for an emergency HOA meeting that James Chun had organized. The parking lot was packed. Every single resident seemed to be there. The tension in the room was palpable. James called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming. I know everyone has questions about what happened with Karen Blackwell. I want to introduce Barbara Martinez, who uncovered the fraud and reported it to the FBI. Barbara is going to explain what she found." As I walked to the front of the room, I noticed that not everyone looked supportive. Some faces were angry. Some were suspicious. Some were openly hostile. Barbara stood tall, meeting their gazes despite her nervousness. I explained how I'd discovered the suspicious expenses, how I'd researched the vendors and found they were fake, how I'd traced the money to Karen's shell companies. I showed copies of the evidence, the canceled checks, the bank records, the proof that Elite Grounds Management and the other vendors didn't exist. When I finished, I expected relief, maybe some applause. Instead, a woman named Patricia Summers stood up, her face red with anger. "How do we know you didn't steal the money and frame Karen?" Patricia demanded. "You had access to these financial records. You could have created fake documents. Karen has been nothing but wonderful to this community for 8 years. And suddenly you accuse her of fraud? This seems very suspicious to me." A murmur of agreement rippled through part of the crowd. "Patricia, the FBI verified everything," James interjected. "They found the evidence in Karen's possession. They found luxury items worth over $1 million in her home. They found maybe Barbara planted those things there," another voice called out. "Maybe this is all a setup." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. People were actually defending Karen, a woman who had stolen millions from them. Barbara's expression shifted from shock to frustration. Marcus stood up. "Are you people insane? Karen stole $3 million from this community. Your money. Money you paid in HOA dues. She created fake companies, wrote fake checks, and funded a luxury lifestyle while you all struggled with increasing fees. And you're defending her? We don't know that she did that." Patricia shot back. "All we know is what Barbara claims she found." Barbara, who conveniently became the hero of this story. Barbara, who probably wants to take over as HOA president now that Karen is gone. Maybe this whole thing is a power grab. The room erupted into shouting. About half the residents were defending me, calling out the absurdity of Patricia's claims. The other half were siding with Patricia, suggesting that Karen was being framed. Then someone I didn't recognize stood up, a tall man in an expensive suit. "My name is Richard Blackwell. I'm Karen's husband, and I want you all to know that my wife is completely innocent." She's being railroaded by bitter, jealous people who never appreciated everything she did for this community. Barbara's eyes narrowed, studying him carefully. "Mr. Blackwell," I said as calmly as I could, "the FBI found evidence in your home. Multiple shell companies. Fake vendor contracts. Millions of dollars in luxury items. Are you claiming you knew nothing about any of that? Those shell companies were for legitimate business ventures that Karen was investing in. The luxury items were gifts from her family. And as for the vendor contracts, Karen told me that she was just following board procedures. If there was fraud, someone else must have manipulated the documents to make it look like Karen was responsible. The scary thing was, some people were nodding along. They wanted to believe Karen was innocent, because the alternative meant admitting they'd been fooled for 8 years. James tried to regain control of the meeting. "Folks, let's focus on facts. The FBI doesn't arrest people without evidence. They found bank accounts in Karen's name. They found bank accounts can be opened by anyone with someone's stolen identity." Richard interrupted. "My wife is a victim here, not a criminal." The meeting devolved into chaos. People were shouting. Some were crying. Others were demanding answers that nobody could provide. Finally, James ended the meeting early, before things got physical. As people filed out, Patricia Summers blocked my path. "You've destroyed this community. Property values will plummet. It's your fault for accusing a good woman. Patricia, she stole from all of us. Why can't you see that? Because I knew Karen? She was kind and dedicated. You're just a troublemaker." Barbara held her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Marcus stepped between us. "Back off, Patricia." As we walked to our car, I noticed Richard Blackwell standing by a black Mercedes, starting at. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. He just stood there, watching, with an expression that made my blood run cold. "Marcus, I don't like this," I whispered. "Me neither. Let's go home. Lock the doors. Maybe we should consider staying with your sister for a few days until things calm down." But things didn't calm down. They got worse. The next morning, I woke up to find my car covered in spray paint. Someone had written "Lyran Thief" across the hood and windshield. They'd also slashed all 4 tires. Barbara stood frozen in her driveway, staring at the vandalism in disbelief. We called the police. They took a report, but said without security camera footage of the actual vandalism, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested it might be neighborhood kids pulling a prank. "A prank," I said, incredulously. "Someone is retaliating because I exposed fraud." The officer looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but we can't assume this is related to the Karen Blackwell situation without evidence." After the police left, I called Agent Rodriguez. She took it more seriously. "This is intimidation, Mrs. Martinez. Someone is trying to scare you into silence. I'm going to have the local FBI office increase their monitoring of your neighborhood. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you consider staying somewhere else for a few weeks. I'm not letting them chase me out of my own home. I understand your frustration, but your safety is more important than making a point. These people are desperate. Karen is facing decades in prison, and her husband Richard is potentially facing charges as an accessory. Desperate people do dangerous things." That evening, Marcus and I were debating whether to leave when James Chun knocked on our door. "Barbara, I just heard about your car." "I'm so sorry. Listen, I want you to know that most of the community supports you. Patricia and her group are loud, but they're in the minority. We're organizing a legal defense fund to help the HOA recover the stolen money. We're also looking into filing a civil lawsuit against Karen to seize her assets." "James, I appreciate that, but I'm starting to wonder if this was all worth it. Maybe I should have just kept quiet." "No," James said firmly. "Don't you dare think that. You did the right thing. Karen is a criminal who has victimized multiple communities. You stopped her. You're a hero, whether everyone sees it right now or not." Barbara managed a weak smile, appreciating his support. After James left, I checked my email and found a message from an unfamiliar address. The subject line was "Final Warning." I opened it. "You should have minded your own business. You cost Karen everything. Now you're going to pay. Watch your back. Barbara, accidents happen. My hands trembled as I showed Marcus the email. He immediately called Agent Rodriguez, who told us to forward it to her immediately and to take it very seriously. "Pack some bags," Marcus said after the call ended. "We're going to your sister's in Denver. Tonight. Right now." Marcus, no arguments. Someone just threatened your life. We're leaving until the FBI catch us, whoever sent that email. As I started packing, my phone rang. It was Agent Rodriguez. "Mrs. Martinez, we traced the IP address from that threatening email. It came from a computer at a Starbucks near downtown. But here's what's interesting. We pulled security footage from that. The person who sent the email was Richard Blackwell." Barbra's face went pale. "Karen's husband threatened me." "Yes." "And based on this threat, combined with evidence we found suggesting he was actively involved in helping Karen launder the stolen money, we're going to arrest him tomorrow morning. But tonight, I need you out of that house. Can you go somewhere safe? We're packing right now." "We're going to my sister's in Denver." "Good. Stay there until we have Richard in custody." "Mrs. Martinez, I want you to understand something. You exposed a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise run by two very dangerous people. What you did took incredible courage. But it also puts you in serious danger. Karen and Richard Blackwell are facing decades in federal prison. They have nothing to lose now." As Marcus loaded our bags into his car, we weren't using mine, vandalized one. I looked back at our house. We'd lived here for 15 years. Raised our kids here, made friends here, and now we were fleeing like criminals because I'd done the right thing. Barbara's expression was a mixture of fear, anger, and determination. We'd been on the road for about an hour when Marcus's phone rang. It was James Chun. "Marcus, tell Barbara not to come back yet. Something happened. About 30 minutes after you left, someone threw a brick through your front window, and the brick had a note tied to it." "What did it say?" "It said, 'This is just the beginning.'" Cliffhanger. As we drove through the darkness toward Denver, leaving our home and our community behind, I realized that exposing Karen's fraud scheme had started a war. A war where the criminals had everything to lose and nothing left to restrain them. And somewhere behind us, in the shadows of Pinewood Estates, someone was planning their next move. The question wasn't whether they'd come after me again, it was when and how far they'd go. Can you believe Richard threatened Barbara? What would you do if you were in her situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed, because reveals the FBI's raid on Richard, plus a shocking twist about who else was involved in the fraud scheme. The story is about to get even crazier. We arrived at my sister Elena's house in Denver at 3 in the morning. She was waiting up, worry on her face. I'd called from the road, explaining everything: the fraud, the threats, the vandalism. "Stay as long as you need," Elena said, hugging me. "Your safety matters most." Barbara collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and overwhelmed. I barely slept that night. Every sound made me jump. Every car that drove past the house made my heart race. I kept replaying Richard Blackwell's cold stare in my mind, kept seeing the threatening email over and over. "Watch your back, Barbara. Accidents happen." The next morning, Agent Rodriguez called with news. "Mrs. Martinez, we arrested Richard Blackwell 2 hours ago at his workplace. He's being charged as an accessory to wire fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation." We also executed a search warrant on his vehicle and found something very interesting. "What did you find?" "A detailed file on you. Photos of your house, your car, your daily routine. Notes about when you leave for work, when your husband leaves, when your house is empty. He was surveilling you, planning something. We don't know what exactly, but it wasn't good." My stomach turned. He was stalking me. Yes. And based on evidence we found in his computer, he was also actively involved in Karen's fraud scheme. We found emails between them discussing how to hide money, how to create fake vendors, how to eliminate problematic board members. Richard wasn't just an innocent bystander. He was Karen's partner in this entire operation. Barbara sat up straight, her fear turning to anger. How much did he know? Everything. In fact, Richard actually masterminded the scheme. He has accounting and finance background. Karen had the people skills, but Richard was the brains. They were partners. So they did this together for 12 years, across 3 states. Stealing from thousands of people, you exposed a criminal enterprise operating over a decade. After the call ended, I told Marcus and Elena what Agent Rodriguez had said. "A detailed file on you," Marcus said, his voice shaking with anger. "That psychopath was planning to hurt you. Barbara, maybe worse." "But they caught him," Elena said quickly. "He's in custody." "Karen's in custody. You're safe now." I wanted to believe her, but something in my gut told me this wasn't over yet. 2 days later, Agent Rodriguez called again. "Mrs. Martinez, we've made another arrest. Greg Miller, the board member who defended Karen at the community meeting. We found evidence that he was receiving payments from Karen in exchange for blocking any oversight of her activities. He's being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice." I knew something was wrong with him. He was way too defensive of Karen. He had good reason to be. We found that Karen paid him $55,000 over 3 years in consulting fees that were completely fictitious. He never did any consulting work. It was simply bribery to keep him loyal and to ensure he would shoot down any investigation attempts. Barbara shook her head in disgust. How many people were involved in this? So far, we've identified 3 people who were actively complicit: Karen, Richard, and Greg. But we're also investigating several other board members and community members who may have known about the fraud and chose to look the other way, possibly in exchange for favors or reduced HOA fees. This is insane. Our entire HOA leadership was corrupt. It appears that way. Karen was very strategic about who she placed in positions of power. She surrounded herself with people who were either loyal to her, benefiting from the scheme, or too intimidated to speak up. It's actually a textbook example of how fraud rings operate: isolate, intimidate, and insulate. Over the next week, more arrests followed. Patricia Summers, the woman who had confronted me at the community meeting, was arrested for receiving $32,000 in fraudulent landscaping credits that essentially made her HOA dues free for 4 years. 2 other board members were arrested for accepting bribes. A local contractor was arrested for creating fake invoices that Karen used to justify payments to her shell companies. The scandal exploded nationally. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, everyone covered it. Massive HOA fraud ring exposed trended on social media. Financial experts discussed how common HOA fraud was. James Chun called me with an update on the community situation. "Barbara, things have changed dramatically since you left. Once people learned about Greg Miller's arrest and Patricia's involvement, opinion turned completely. Everyone realizes now that Karen had an entire network of accomplices. People are apologizing for doubting you. There's talk of naming a community park after you. I don't want a park named after me, James. I just want my life back. I understand, but I want you to know the community is behind you now. We've hired a forensic accounting firm to do a complete audit of the past 10 years. We're working with the FBI to recover as much stolen money as possible. And we're implementing new financial oversight procedures to make sure this never happens again." Barbara managed a small smile, feeling vindicated. "Have you heard anything about Richard and Karen?" "They're both being held without bail. The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum sentence, 30 years in federal prison. With the evidence the FBI has, their defense attorneys are apparently trying to negotiate plea deals, but the prosecutor isn't interested. They want to make an example of them." 3 weeks after fleeing to Denver, Agent Rodriguez finally told us it was safe to come home. "We've arrested everyone who was involved in the scheme or who posed a threat to you. The investigation is winding down, and we're preparing for trial. You can return to Pinewood Estates safely." When Marcus and I drove back into our neighborhood, the entrance had been completely redone. Fresh flowers bloomed everywhere. The fountain worked again. New lights lined the road. A banner hung over the entrance. "Welcome home, Barbara. Thank you for your courage." Barbara's eyes filled with tears. As we pulled into our driveway, neighbors started coming out of their houses. Tom Rodriguez, James Chun, Susan Park, and dozens of others I'd lived near for 15 years. They were clapping. Some were holding signs. "Barbara, our hero, and thank you for exposing the truth." I got out of the car, overwhelmed. Tom stepped forward and shook my hand. "Barbara, on behalf of the entire community, thank you. You saved us from years of continued theft. You exposed criminals who would have kept stealing until there was nothing left. You're a hero." People lined up to thank me, to apologize for doubting me, to share their relief that the nightmare was over. Mrs. Martinez, the elderly woman on a fixed income, hugged me and cried. "You saved my home," she whispered. "I was about to be forced out because I couldn't afford the increasing dues. Now, I know it wasn't necessary, it was theft. Thank you for fighting for us." The community threw a celebration dinner that night. Over 300 people attended, nearly everyone in Pinewood Estates. James presented me with a plaque that read to Barbara Martinez, whose courage and integrity exposed corruption and protected our community. But the best part came 2 days later, when Agent Rodriguez called with final news about the investigation. "Mrs. Martinez, I wanted to update you on the financial recovery. We've seized all of Karen and Richard's assets, their house, their cars, their bank accounts, their luxury items. Everything is being liquidated. We've also traced money to offshore accounts they were hiding. In total, we've recovered approximately $2.8 million of the $3.2 million they stole from your community." $2.8 million? That's incredible. The HOA will receive the majority of those funds once the criminal trial concludes. It won't make anyone whole legal fees, and the damage they caused can't be fully repaired, but it's substantial. Additionally, we recovered about $1.6 million from the Arizona case and $1.3 million from the Florida case. Those communities will also receive restitution. Barbara clasped her hands together in relief. What about Karen and Richard? What happens to them now? Their trial is scheduled for 6 months from now. Based on the evidence, the prosecutor is confident of conviction on all counts. Karen and Richard are both facing 25 to 30 years in federal prison. Karen is 52 and Richard is 56. That's essentially a life sentence. They'll die in prison. Good. They destroyed so many lives. They deserve it. I agree. Mrs. Martinez, I've been investigating financial crimes for 18 years, and I've rarely seen someone with your level of determination and courage. Most people would have backed down when Karen started retaliating. You didn't. You pushed forward, gathered evidence, and helped us build an airtight case. Because of you, 2 dangerous criminals are off the streets, and thousands of victims are getting justice. After the call ended, I sat in my living room and thought about everything, from noticing suspicious expenses, to fleeing in the night, to returning as a hero. It had been terrifying and exhausting, but it had been worth it. Marcus sat down next to me. "How are you feeling?" "Relieved, vindicated, proud, and really, really tired." He laughed. "You should be tired. You took down a multi-million-dollar fraud ring. That's not something most people do in their lifetime." "I just did what anyone should have done. I saw something wrong, and I reported it." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Most people would have looked the other way. Most people would have been too scared of retaliation. You weren't. That's courage, Barb. Real courage." A week later, I attended a community meeting where the new HOA board presented their plans for using the recovered funds. The money would be used to reduce dues, repair neglected amenities, rebuild the community reserve fund, and establish an annual scholarship for neighborhood kids going to college. James Chun, now serving as the new HOA president, asked me to say a few words. I stood up, looking at the faces of my neighbors' people I'd protected, even when some of them had turned against me. Barbara stood tall, her voice strong and clear. 4 months ago, I discovered our HOA president was stealing from us. It would have been easier to ignore it, to avoid the conflict and danger. But I couldn't. This is our community, our homes. Oh, trust. When someone in power violates that trust, we must act. Fraud thrives in silence. It thrives when people are afraid to ask questions, too intimidated to demand transparency. What happened here happens in communities everywhere. If you see something suspicious, unexplained expenses, unknown vendors, leaders refusing oversight, speak up. Ask questions. Report it. That's not causing trouble. That's protecting your community. Thank you for your support and trust. I understand why some doubted me. Karen was convincing. She fooled us for 8 years, but we're stronger now, wiser, and we'll never let this happen again. The room erupted in applause. People stood, cheering. I saw tears on many faces. As I sat back down, my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Rodriguez. Thought you'd want to know Karen and Richard both tried to negotiate plea deals today. Prosecutor rejected both. They're going to trial, and they're going to prison for a very long time. Justice is coming. You made this happen? Barbara smiled, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of victory. But then another text came through. This one from an unknown number. You think this is over? You have no idea what you've started. There are more of us than you know. Watch your back. My blood ran cold. I showed Marcus the text. Another threat. I thought everyone involved was arrested. So did I. I immediately forwarded the text to Agent Rodriguez. She called back within minutes. Mrs. Martinez, we're tracing that number now. Stay inside. Lock your doors. I'm sending agents to your location immediately. Who could this be? You said everyone was arrested. Everyone we knew about. But this text suggests there might be additional accomplices we haven't identified yet. Someone who is involved in the fraud ring and is now worried about being exposed. Barbara's hands trembled as she held the phone. Marcus grabbed his car keys. We're not staying here. We're going back to Elena's right now. Wait, Agent Rodriguez said over the phone. Don't leave yet. We're tracking the location of whoever sent that text. They might be nearby. If you leave now, they might follow you. Stay inside with all doors locked until my agents arrive. They're 5 minutes away. Those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Marcus and I sat in the living room, watching the windows, listening for any sound outside. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every car passing by made my heart race. Then we heard footsteps on our front porch. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Someone was out there. The doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to get in. Marcus grabbed a baseball bat from the closet. I dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. 911? What's your emergency? Someone's trying to break into my house. We're at 1542 Meadowbrook Drive, Pinewood Estates. We need police, immediately. Units are all ready en route to your location. Ma'am, stay on the line. Don't open the door. The rattling stopped. Then we heard footsteps moving around the side of the house toward the back door. Marcus and I ran to the bedroom and locked ourselves inside. We could hear the person trying the back door now, testing the locks. Then sirens, beautiful, wonderful sirens, growing louder as police cars and FBI vehicles screamed into our neighborhood. We heard shouting outside. FBI, get on the ground, now. More shouting. Sounds of a struggle. Then silence. 2 minutes later, there was a knock on our bedroom door. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, it's Agent Rodriguez. Yo oré. Safe. Come out. We unlocked the door and found Agent Rodriguez standing in our hallway with 2 other agents. We caught him, she said. You're not going to believe who it was. As Agent Rodriguez led us outside to see who had been caught, I realized that Karen and Richard's fraud scheme had been even bigger and more complicated than anyone imagined. The person in handcuffs, being loaded into an FBI vehicle, made my jaw drop. This wasn't just about stolen money anymore. This was about a criminal network that went deeper than we ever suspected. And we'd just caught someone who could expose the entire operation. Who do you think was trying to break into Barbara's house? Drop your predictions in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed because is the explosive finale where all the secrets are revealed. The trial happens, and Barbara finally gets the justice she fought so hard for. You won't want to miss it. Agent Rodriguez led us outside, her hand on my shoulder reassuringly. Multiple FBI vehicles surrounded our house, their red and blue lights painting the neighborhood in flashing colors. Neighbors were emerging from their homes, watching the scene unfold. And there, handcuffed between two agents, was someone I never expected to see. Robert Castellano, the HOA's attorney, the man who had represented our community for over 10 years. The man who had sent me that $4,000-5-100 fine letter when I first started asking questions about Karen's fraud. Barbara's jaw dropped in absolute shock. "Robert," I whispered. "Our lawyer was involved." Agent Rodriguez nodded grimly. He was more than involved. Robert Castellano was a founding member of their fraud operation. He helped set up shell companies, draft fake contracts, and create legal paperwork. He's been their accomplice from the beginning, 12 years across 3 states. But he represented us. That's why they recruited him. Robert had access to everything. He knew how to structure the fraud to avoid detection. When you investigate it, he recommended the intimidation, strategita, fines, harassment, retaliation. Marcus put his arm around me as I processed this betrayal. "How did you figure out it was him?" "The threatening text you received came from a burner phone, but we traced it to a cell tower near Robert's law office. Then we pulled his phone records and found dozens of calls between him and Richard over the past week, calls made after Richard was already in custody. Robert was panicking, worried that Richard would expose him to get a plea deal. So he decided to eliminate the person who started this entire investigation." Barbara clenched her fists, fury replacing shock. "He was going to kill me?" Agent Rodriguez's expression was grave. "We found a gun in his car, along with a detailed plan for making your death look like a home invasion robbery." Robert was desperate. He knew if this went to trial, Richard and Karen would eventually give him up to reduce their sentences. His only option was to silence you before that happened. As agents loaded Robert into an FBI vehicle, he turned and looked directly at me. There was no remorse in his eyes, just cold hatred. "You should have minded your own business." Kajet out. "You destroyed everything." "No," I said loudly, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "You destroyed everything. You betrayed your clients. You stole from people who trusted you. You deserve everything that's coming to you." Robert sneered, as agents pushed him into the vehicle. "Good luck at trial. My testimony is going to make you look like an obsessed stalker who fabricated evidence to frame innocent people. By the time I'm done, Karen and Richard will walk free, and you'll be the one facing charges." Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. "That's not going to happen, Castellano. We have your emails with Karen discussing how to hide money. We have your bank records showing payments from their shell companies. We have evidence of every call, every meeting, every transaction. You're going to prison for 25 years, minimum, and your testimony won't help Karen and Richard. It'll only make things worse for all of you." The vehicle drove away, taking Robert Castellano out of our lives forever. Over the next 3 months, the prosecution built their case against Karen Blackwell, Richard Blackwell, and Robert Castellano. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of documents, bank records, emails, witness testimony, forensic accounting reports. The 3 defendants tried every legal maneuver to avoid trial, but nothing worked. Greg Miller and Patricia Summers both accepted plea deals, agreeing to testify against the main conspirators in exchange for reduced sentences. Greg received 3 years in federal prison. Patricia received 18 months. The trial began in June 2025. Court TV broadcast it live. The courtroom was packed every day. I was the prosecution's first witness. Walking into that courtroom and seeing Karen, Richard, and Robert sitting at the defense table was surreal. Karen wore a conservative suit and had styled her hair to look less glamorous clearly. Her attorney's advice to appear sympathetic. Richard looked tired and defeated. Robert maintained an arrogant expression, like he believed he could still talk his way out of this. Barbara walked to the witness stand, her spine straight with determination. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chun, guided me through my testimony. I explained how I first noticed the suspicious expenses, how I investigated the fake vendors, how I traced the money to shell companies, how Karen retaliated against me when I asked questions, how Robert sent threatening letters, how I reported everything to the FBI. Karen's defense attorney tried to make me look obsessed during cross-examining. Mrs. Martinez, didn't you spend months investigating Ms. Blackwell's behavior? Some might call stalking. I investigated suspicious financial records that were public HOA documents. That's due diligence, not stalking. You filed complaints, hired an attorney, reported her to federal authorities. That seems like harassment. I looked at the jury. If reporting a $3 million fraud is harassment, then I'm guilty. But most people call that being a responsible citizen. Several jurors nodded. Barbara's expression remained calm and confident. Agent Rodriguez testified about the FBI's investigation and evidence. She described luxury items, seized designer handbags, worth $25,000 each, jewelry worth over $300,000, artwork worth $500,000. The prosecutor displayed Karen's Instagram, showing lavish vacations and luxury hotels. The jury looked disgusted. Richard's defense claimed he knew nothing, but emails between him and Karen explicitly discussed the fraud, including one where Richard wrote, "We need to be more careful with shell company names. Using our initials was stupid." Robert's attorney claimed coercion, but evidence showed Robert received over $400,000 in payments over 10 years. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution called 42 witnesses. The defense called only 6, and none of them were credible. Greg Miller testified about how Karen recruited him and paid him to block oversight. Patricia Summers testified about receiving free dues in exchange for supporting Karen and attacking questioners. "I believed Karen when she said Barbara was a troublemaker," Patricia said, crying. "I'm so ashamed I attacked her when she was trying to help." Barbara watched from the gallery, her expression a mix of vindication and sadness. The most damaging testimony came from forensic accountant Jessica Liu. She walked the jury through every fake vendor, every inflated expense, every shell company transaction. She showed exactly how money flowed from HOA accounts to Karen's personal accounts. "In your professional opinion, was this sophisticated?" the prosecutor asked. "Extremely sophisticated. This required extensive knowledge of accounting, corporate law, and HOA regulations. Carefully planned and executed over many years. This wasn't opportunistic crime. This was professional operation." Could Ms. Blackwell have done this alone? Absolutely not. This required multiple people with different expertise, financial knowledge, legal knowledge, and access to HOA operations. Karen Blackwell, Richard Blackwell, and Robert Castellano each played essential roles in this criminal enterprise. When it came time for closing arguments, the prosecutor was devastating. "This case is about betrayal. These defendants stole $3.2 million from families who trusted them. They didn't just steal money, they stole security. Elderly residents on fixed incomes went without necessities so Karen Blackwell could buy designer handbags. When Barbara Martinez exposed this fraud, they tried to destroy her. They fined her, threatened her, vandalized her property. Robert Castellano even planned to kill her. The evidence is overwhelming. Hold them accountable." The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. When they returned, the foreperson stood. "On all counts, we find the defendants guilty." Barbara's eyes filled with tears of relief and triumph. Karen's face crumpled. She started crying. Richard stared at the table, emotionless. Robert shook his head in disbelief, still unable to accept that his perfect plan had failed. The judge set sentencing for 4 weeks later. During those 4 weeks, the victims' over 300 families from Pinewood Estates, plus victims from Arizona and Florida, submitted impact statements describing how the fraud had affected their lives, families who had struggled to pay increasing dues, elderly residents who had been forced to make impossible choices between HOA fees and medication, young couples who had delayed having children because they couldn't afford the costs. When sentencing day arrived, the courtroom was packed again. The judge, a stern woman named Karen Thompson, read through dozens of victim impact statements before announcing the sentences. Karen Blackwell, you have been convicted of orchestrating a massive fraud scheme that victimized hundreds of innocent people over 12 years. Your crimes were not impulsive. They were calculated, deliberate, and cruel. You used your position of trust to steal from the very people who elected you to protect them. You showed no remorse, no guilt, no acknowledgement of the harm you caused. I hereby sentence you to 32 years in federal prison. Karen sobbed loudly as marshals led her away. Richard Blackwell, you were the architect of this fraud scheme. You provided the financial expertise that made it possible. You helped your wife hide the stolen money. And when the scheme was exposed, you threatened and attempted to harm a witness. I sentenced you to 35 years in federal prison. Richard remained emotionless as he was led away. Robert Castellano, your betrayal is perhaps the most egregious. You were an attorney and officer of the court who violated your oath and your ethical obligations. You used your legal knowledge to facilitate fraud and corruption. You abused your position of trust for personal profit. And when caught, you attempted to murder a witness. I sentence you to 38 years in federal prison. Robert finally showed emotion rage. He started shouting at the judge as marshals restrained him. This is a miscarriage of justice. I'll appeal. The judge banged her gavel. Remove him from my courtroom. Barbara watched all 3 defendants being led away, feeling the weight of justice finally delivered. After the sentencing, Agent Rodriguez approached me outside the courthouse. Congratulations, Mrs. Martinez. You did it! 3 dangerous criminals are going to spend the rest of their lives in prison because of your courage and persistence. Thank you, Agent Rodriguez, for everything. I couldn't have done this without the FBI's support. You gave us the case on a silver platter. Most fraud investigations take years to develop. You handed us everything we needed in a matter of months. You're an exceptional investigator. The media wanted interviews, but I declined. I'd already told my story in court. Now I just wanted to go home. The community held a celebration that evening. Over 400 people attended, including victims from Arizona and Florida. James Chun presented me with an award to Barbara Martinez, who taught us that one person with courage can change everything. The community established the Barbara Martinez Scholarship Fund, awarding the first $15,000 scholarship to Mrs. Martinez's granddaughter, who planned to study criminal justice. Barbara smiled through tears as the community applauded. 6 months later, letters arrived from Arizona and Florida communities. They'd recovered $1.4 million and $1.1 million, respectively, thanking me for exposing the scheme. In total, across 3 states, we recovered nearly $5.5 million. A year after the trial, I spoke at a national HOA conference. Over 2,000 attendees heard my fraud prevention presentation. It went viral online. People from dozens of states wrote, saying they'd discovered similar fraud schemes after watching. Barbara stood at the podium, confident and empowered. 2 years after the trial, I visited Karen Blackwell in federal prison. Agent Rodriguez thought it was a bad idea, but I needed closure. Karen looked older, tired, completely defeated. Prison had stripped away her glamorous facade entirely. She wore a standard prison uniform. Her hair was gray and no makeup, no jewelry. She looked like what she truly was, criminal serving a 32-year sentence for massive fraud. We sat across from each other in the visitation room, separated by a plexiglass barrier. "Why you here?" Karen asked, her voice flat. "I wanted to ask you something. Why did you do it? You had everything: a beautiful home, a community that respected you. Why throw it all away for money? Karen was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed bitterly. You really don't understand, do you? It was never enough. The house, the respect it, wasn't real wealth. Primera wanted more. I deserved more. Those people were fools who never questioned anything. Taking their money was easy, and it was thrilling. Until you got caught. Until you ruined everything, Karen hissed. You couldn't just mind your own business. You had to play detective. You had to be the hero. Now I'm here, and you get to be celebrated. But you know what? In 10 years, no one will remember you. Your moment of fame will fade, and I'll still be here, knowing I lived better for 12 years than you ever will in your entire mediocre life. Barbara stood up, pity in her eyes. You're wrong, Karen. I'll always remember that I stood up for what's right. I'll always know I protected my community, and every day I'll wake up free while you wake up in a cell. That's not mediocre. That's victory. I walked out without looking back. Today, 5 years later, Pinewood Estates is peaceful. We have strong financial oversight, annual audits, and a culture where asking questions is encouraged. I still live in the same house. I walk my dog past the entrance and see proof that ordinary people can fight corruption and win. Karen, Richard, and Robert will die in federal prison. Their fraud empire was crushed. Justice was served, and I learned something important. You don't need a badge or law degree to make a difference. You just need to pay attention, ask questions, and refuse to look away from wrongdoing. That's what heroes do. Barbara smiled, looking at the Pinewood Estates entrance sign, finally at peace. Thank you so much for following Barbara's incredible journey. Her courage exposed a massive fraud scheme and brought 3 criminals to justice. If this story inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video. Remember, if you ever see suspicious activity in your HOA or any organization, don't ignore it. Ask questions. Demand transparency. Report fraud. You might just be the hero your community needs. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on this case, and let me know what story you want to hear next. Justice was served, and it's all thanks to one brave woman who refused to stay silent.